Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Caleb Likes Books. I'm Caleb, and today I'm going to be bringing you guys a ranking video. So today I am going to be ranking the adult and young adult novels of the Star Wars The High Republic series, Phase 1. Since Phase 2 is, I believe, actually already started at this point, or at least will be starting very soon. I know the very first novel is coming out soon. Since that's happening, I thought I would take today's video and rank the Phase 1 novels. So kind of my thoughts on the High Republic in general, just to kind of get an idea. It kind of helped me get back into reading in early 2021. I was kind of wanting to get back into books. After not really reading that much at all for several years while I was in college. I read a bit in high school, and then in college my interest in reading, I still wanted to read books, but the time that I dedicated to it just completely dropped to zero. Whereas early 2021 I saw that the High Republic series was starting, and I was like, it's a new series, it sounds really interesting, I'll try it out, and that's kind of what got me back into reading. So this series is near and dear to me for that reason, but also I think it is quite possibly the best Star Wars content that has been created under Disney since they bought Star Wars back in 2012. Not that I haven't enjoyed the movies, I have enjoyed all of the movies and all of the shows to varying degrees, but in general I have liked all of those things, and I've enjoyed most of the books that I have read in the Disney canon. But to me, The High Republic is like the best thing that has come out of Disney Star Wars, and I would say one of the best things to come out of Star Wars overall. So, now that I've talked a little bit about my experience with it, I'm gonna say that this is only ranking the adult and young adult novels from Phase 1. So there will be 6 books in this ranking. I'm not including the middle grade books because I have not read them. I've heard that some of them are very good, but I just haven't read them. So this will only be the 3 young adult novels and the 3 adult novels. So starting out, number 6, my least favorite, is the only one out of the bunch that I was not really that into. And even this one I still liked aspects of it, but all the other ones I enjoy thoroughly. This is the only one where I was like, it's okay. And that, unfortunately, is Out of the Shadows by Justina Ireland. Oddly enough, considering it is my least favorite, this book came out on my birthday, so I just think that's kind of funny. But this book just didn't quite work for me. It's not bad by any means. I really enjoyed the characters in it. Vernesta Rowe is a really cool character. I believe she is mainly more prominent in the middle grade books, and I think in the comics as well, which I've not read. Not really much of a comics reader, but she's really good in this book. I also really like Rhys Silas. He's one of my favorite High Republic characters in general, and he's kind of the one main through line throughout the YA novels. So he's really good in this book, but really the plot in this didn't interest me that much. It's kind of this couple of different mysteries going on that they've got to solve, and things like that, and it's kind of hard for me to even talk about because honestly I didn't find this book that memorable. But just different mysteries going on that they have to solve, and I thought that aspect of it was kind of interesting, but it didn't quite pull me in. The best part of this book for me was the relationships between the Jedi characters and just seeing them in general, because I really like the Jedi in the High Republic. So in general, this one was, I think, pretty easily my least favorite. From here on out, some of the other ones are kind of hard for me to place, but this one is the only one where I think that it is absolutely my least favorite, which I hate to say because, you know, I really like the High Republic, but something's gonna come in last, and unfortunately this one is it. Next up, number 5 is one that I hate to put at number 5 because I really enjoy it, and it's one that I actually started to reread recently. I was going to do a full Phase 1 reread before Path of Deceit, the first YA novel in this Phase 2 came out, but I didn't get through this one all the way. Unfortunately, I wanted to get through all 6 of these, but I just didn't make the time for it, unfortunately. But Light of the Jedi is my number 5. The very first High Republic novel that came out. And it is a really good start. It does a great job of establishing the Jedi characters. It's got Avar Kriss and Elzar Mann and Bel Zettifar and Loden Greatstorm, all these fantastic characters. I think most of the Jedi that are in this book and in the High Republic series in general are all fantastically done. So it does a great job of establishing those characters. It does a great job of establishing the Nihil as villains. Right from the beginning with this book, I was right on board with the Nihil as villains. And I really like the plot in this as well. It focuses on the Great Disaster, which is basically something in hyperspace goes really wrong, and it leads to the potential destruction of planets and things like that. And the Jedi and the Republic have to basically stop it from happening, and it leads to the emergence of the Nihil and all this stuff. It's a really good setup, and it's a really good plot, and it does a great job of starting the series, introducing the Nihil to the galaxy. They've already been kind of doing stuff around, but this is where they really come into prominence. And it does a great job of showing their first kind of big step into the galaxy and how the Jedi are responding to them and all this stuff. And I love how the Jedi are written in this book, and in general in the High Republic, but especially this book. If you want a very kind of pro-Jedi book, this is a good book to read, because it's very much like the Jedi are awesome, they work together, and they're just all around really great. Whereas some of the other books show a little bit more of the flaws of the Jedi, this one is very much, I think, more pro-Jedi. So if that's what you're into, then this is probably a good book to read. So, Light of the Jedi is a fantastic start to the High Republic, but unfortunately, I just like the other books more. Next up at number 4 is the final book out of the 6 to have been released, and that is Midnight Horizon by Daniel Jose Older. This one's kind of weird for me. I considered putting it at number 5 below Light of the Jedi, but I decided to put it a little higher because I really liked the character work in this book. Again, Rhys Silas, I love him. He's on the cover. He's one of my favorite characters in the series, and also Comac, who's the other character on the cover. I really like him as well. I really like their dynamic that they have, and just those two characters in general. It also brings in Ram, who's more of mainly like a comedy relief character. He has some more serious moments in here too, but he is much of the comedy relief in this book. But he was a lot of fun, and just the characters in general in this book I really, really enjoyed. The thing that kind of brings it down a little bit for me is the plot. I only really found the plot particularly interesting in the second half or third of the book. The main thing that really kept me reading for a very large chunk of it was just the characters. But it was still a really solid book, and I would say probably Light of the Jedi is overall more solid, but I just really liked the character work in this book, so that's mainly why it goes ahead of Light of the Jedi at number 4. Next, at number 3, The Halfway Point, I have the second novel that was released in Phase 1, released out of the YA and adult novels, Into the Dark by Claudia Gray. The very first YA novel introduces Rhys Silas and several other characters, Comac and Orla, and some other ones who I really enjoy all of those. In fact, I would say all of 3 of them that I just mentioned are among my favorite characters in the High Republic so far. And it's a great start to the YA books. It introduces the Drengir as villains, who I believe are pretty prominent in the comics. Unfortunately, this is the only time they are really featured in the novels, which is one of the downsides to this book for me. And it's not even a problem with this book, it's a problem with the YA books in general for the High Republic, because the other 2, Midnight Horizon and Out of the Shadows, are more focused on the Nihil, whereas this book focuses mainly on the Drengir, and it does have a couple of Nihil characters as well, but the Drengir are kind of the main focus for villains. And because of that, I thought that the adult novels were going to be focused on the Nihil as villains, and the YA novels were going to be focused on the Drengir, and unfortunately that's not the case, and I think that was... it wasn't necessarily a bad decision, because I think the stories themselves were still pretty good in the YA, but I think it was kind of a missed opportunity, because I really, as someone who hasn't read the comics, I would have really liked to see more of the Drengir in the YA books, but it's not really a fault of this book, it's just something I thought I'd mention. But I really liked this one overall. Great characters, once again. I think that's the really strong point of this book, is the characters. And the YA books in general. Not the characters in the adult novels aren't great as well, but I think the YA books, the biggest strength is the characters. Does a good job of introducing the Drengir, even though they don't appear in the other YA books. Overall, it's a really fantastic one, and I enjoy it a lot. Now, my top two are kind of difficult for me to decide because I think that my number two pick stuck with me a little bit more, but I don't think it's as overall good as the number one pick, which I think is just a nearly perfect book. So that's the only reason why it's ordered my number one and number two the way they are. Even though I think my number two, in some ways, maybe is even better. But my number two is The Fallen Star by Claudia Gray, the final one of the adult novels. I really loved this book. The first, third or half didn't grab me as much. I still really enjoyed it, but it just didn't quite hit as high points as other books in the High Republic have for me. But the second half of this book is probably my favorite section of any of the High Republic books so far, even more so than my number one pick, I think. The second half of this book is even higher above the highs of my number one. I absolutely loved it. But again, great characters. Stellan Gios is very prominent in this one, as he is in my number one as well. As well as Elzar Mann, who Elzar Mann is probably my favorite High Republic character. I love him in these books, and he has a lot of great moments in this book. And the other characters who appear, there's a lot of Jedi characters that are involved in this one, and they were all really well done. And it also more emphasizes the Nameless, which have kind of been built up as being the real kind of villain of the High Republic. Of course, the Nihil are kind of the main villain, but the Nameless are, I think, even more threatening because they feed on the Jedi and on the Force. And that is much more prominent in this book. Even though they appeared in the other ones. But I loved how that worked in this book as well. It kind of read like a horror novel at some points, and it reminded me kind of cosmic horror, which, as someone who really likes H.P. Lovecraft and cosmic horror in general, I've not read really much beyond H.P. Lovecraft. I am soon, but I just love that kind of style of horror, and this reminded me a lot of that. This unknowable horror that you just cannot stop, something completely alien to yourself that is just terrifying and all this stuff. I love how that was handled in this book, and overall just the plot in this book, the characters in this book, was just fantastically done. The ending made me tear up a little bit, which is, I think, how you know something was done really well. It made me tear up a bit towards the end of this book, because certain events happened that I'm not going to spoil. Yeah, it was really fantastically done. Some people within the Star Wars community have said this was kind of a disappointment for them. Over on Twitter, I'm very active over on Star Wars Twitter, and a lot of people said this one was a little disappointing, and I could not disagree more with that. I thought this was a fantastic book, and it is almost my number one, but just barely didn't make it. So, of course, that only leaves one book left for my number one, and that is Cavan Scott's The Rising Storm. Like I said, I think that the second half of The Fallen Star is probably better than I think anything in The Rising Storm, but I think The Rising Storm is basically just a perfect book. So that's the reason why it's my number one. The characters, the plot, it's all done fantastically. I love the writing style of it. Cavan Scott does such a great job in this book writing tension. It just builds, and everything is going fine in the first half of the book, but you are seeing what the Nihil are up to, and you know something is going to happen, and it just builds tension more and more until everything happens, and it's just done so well. And that's like the biggest plus I have for this book. Not that everything else wasn't done well, but just the way that that was handled was fantastic. And I could not stop reading this book. It was definitely a page turner for me. Just could not stop reading it. So, once again, though, the characters were all great. The plot was really great. The Republic Fair is happening, and the Nihil are planning an attack on it. And just the way things play out is really, really well done. And it is just overall a fantastic book. Once again, I think this is arguably a perfect book, in my opinion. I just think it's so well done. So that's my number one. So that's pretty much all I got for you for this video. Let me know down in the comments if you have read any of the High Republic and what your favorite books from it are. If you have a ranking, let me know down in the comments. And Phase 2 begins very soon. I think it's actually kind of already started. But if not, it's coming very soon. The first YA novel comes out, I believe, in late October, and the first adult novel comes out in November. I will be trying to get my hands on those very soon after they come out, if not day of release. So do expect reviews of those on the channel when they come out. So that is pretty much all I got for you today, so thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.